The death of Popcorn Sutton of Moonshiners still affects many to this day. In the smoky hills of Appalachia, the story of Marvin Popcorn Sutton lingers like the scent of fresh corn mash on a summer night. Years have passed since the legendary moonshiner took his last breath, but to many who still whisper his name over jars of homemade white lightning, his spirit remains as potent as ever. Popcorn Sutton wasn't just a man. He was a myth in the making, a cultural icon draped in overalls and stained with tradition. Born in Maggie Valley, North Carolina, in 1946, Sutton grew up in the heart of moonshine country, where copper stills hissed like dragons in the forest and the law was as crooked as the mountain roads. To him, making moonshine wasn't just a way of life. It was a heritage, an act of rebellion, and an art form that tied him to generations past. He earned his nickname, Popcorn, after a barroom incident involving a broken popcorn machine and a stubborn temper. But it was the name Sutton that would eventually ripple through American subcultures as a symbol of outlaw charisma. His fame didn't blossom from Hollywood or a record label. It fermented slowly, like the shine he so obsessively crafted. Long before the TV show Moonshiners made its debut on the Discovery Channel, Popcorn was documenting his life in grainy VHS tapes and self-published books. His 2002 autobiography, Me and My Liquor, showcased not just his moonshining methods, but his dry wit, sharp tongue, and deep-rooted disdain for government interference. He spoke with the rhythm of the mountains, part poetry, part profanity, all truth. The time Moonshiners aired in 2011, Sutton had already been gone for 2 years. But his presence loomed large over the series. His homemade videos became the cornerstone of its authenticity. The show built its appeal around the image of the romantic outlaw, something Sutton embodied with every fiber of his being. Though he never appeared on the show himself, his legacy became its beating heart. A life distilled. Popcorn Sutton was arrested multiple times for moonshining, but the law never fully broke him. To the federal government, he was a repeat offender. To his admirers, he was a freedom fighter bottling the last of a dying culture. His final arrest in 2008, however, was different. Facing 18 months in federal prison at the age of 62, Sutton feared that confinement would destroy him faster than any bottle of rocket ever could. On March 16, 2009, just days before he was scheduled to report to prison, Popcorn Sutton took his own life. He rigged a hose from the exhaust pipe of his beloved green Ford Fairmont into the car and drifted into the next world with the same resolve he had lived with. The news hit Appalachia like a thunderclap. In moonshine country, he was a legend, part outlaw, part folk hero, part philosopher. His death wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a cultural loss. For many, it signaled the end of an era, the last embers of a once vibrant Appalachian tradition being stamped out by bureaucracy and modernization. A community in Mornito this day, people still visit his grave in Parrottsville, Tennessee, nestled on family land beside the very hills that once hid his stills. His tombstone reads, Popcorn said F*** you. A final rebellious middle finger aimed at authority. A sentiment that echoes with every moonshine jar hoisted in his memory. But the grief that followed his passing was deeper than humor and defiance. Popcorn Sutton wasn't just mourned because he died. He was mourned because he represented something bigger, an America that had once allowed room for the unconventional, a place where eccentricity wasn't punished, but celebrated. His death forced people to grapple with what happens when tradition collides with progress, and when culture becomes criminalized. At the heart of it, Popcorn's death left behind an ache, a reminder of a rural identity slowly being erased. His stills may have been illegal, but to many, They were more honest than the polished lies fed through corporate channels. Sutton distilled his values just like he distilled his moonshine. Raw, unfiltered, and unapologetically real. The moonshine renaissance. Ironically, in the years since Sutton's death, moonshine has gone commercial. Major liquor companies now offer legal moonshine in sleek bottles with stylized labels, selling the backwoods experience to urban drinkers at premium prices. Sutton, who believed in doing things the old way, hand-built stills, secret locations, whispered recipes, would likely scoff at these mass-market imitations. Still, it's hard to ignore the fingerprints he left on the industry. His name lives on through Popcorn Sutton Distilling, a legal whiskey operation started by Hank Williams Jr. and Sutton's widow Pam, though Sutton himself never profited from a single legally sold drop. The distillery claims to carry on his legacy, but many purists argue that the essence of Sutton can't be bottled or branded. It lived in his stories, in his resistance, and in the smoke curling from a copper still deep in the woods. His impact on today's moonshinine. Every episode of Moonshiners, you can feel Sutton's influence. The cast often references him in reverent tones. Tim Smith, a fellow moonshiner and original cast member, has said that Sutton inspired him to continue the craft, and to do it legally if necessary, so the tradition wouldn't vanish completely. Fans, too, carry his legend like a badge. Online forums still discuss his techniques, his sayings, and his beliefs. YouTube comments under clips of his interviews read like eulogies. Popcorn was the last of the real ones. He told it like it was. I wish I could have shared a jar with him. His DIY footage, showing him tending his stills and cussing up a storm, has become sacred digital relics. Even those who never touched a drop of moonshine or stepped foot in Appalachia feel a connection to him. There's something universal in Sutton's story, a longing for freedom, a distrust of power, and a need to preserve one's roots in the face of change. A cautionary tale, but there's also a darker lesson in Sutton's story. While many celebrate his outlaw image, others remember the toll it took on him. The pressure, the legal battles, and the fear of imprisonment ultimately drove him to suicide. His death is a reminder of what can happen when culture and identity are treated as crimes, when people are pushed to the margins because they don't fit within modern frameworks today. Rural mental health remains a crisis. Isolation, poverty, and generational trauma often go unseen and untreated. Popcorn's fate isn't just about moonshine. It's about the emotional weight of being misunderstood by society. His passing calls for deeper empathy, not just romanticism and spirit whether you see him as a lawbreaker or a folk hero. There's no denying that Popcorn Sutton left a legacy few can match. His image is emblazoned on t-shirts, murals, whiskey bottles, and tattoos. His raspy voice lives on in video clips, still preaching the gospel of corn liquor and mountain pride. And in countless hills and hollows, homemade stills still bubble quietly under starlit skies, tended by people who learned the craft not from textbooks, but from men like him. Popcorn Sutton didn't just make moonshine. He made a statement that independence is worth fighting for, that heritage is worth preserving, and that even in death, one man can inspire generations to come. Conclusion: the death of Popcorn Sutton still affects many because it wasn't just the loss of a man, it was the loss of a way of life. He carried with him the echoes of Appalachia, the grit of rebellion, and the sweet, smoky soul of moonshine. And though he may be gone, every mason jar raised in defiance, every homemade still hidden in the woods, keeps his spirit alive. He once said, Jesus turned water into wine. I turned it into liquor. That's the kind of gospel that doesn't die. It ferments, it lingers, and it passes from hand to hand, just like the man himself.